Well, the expansion of technology and the access and availability of the internet has really maximized the access to information that ordinary people have all throughout the world. People can much more easily get information than ever before in history. And because of that, the monopoly on information, the monopoly on opinion-setting sources, the monopoly on public opinion and the means of crafting public opinion has been broken down. The internet, which was developed by the U.S. military and U.S. government for their own purposes, has really become something that has changed the course of entire history. At no point, no longer, do Western media sources have a monopoly on the ability to craft public opinion. And because of that, they are gradually losing their grip on the world. And even here in the United States, here within the United States even, we're seeing a rise of public opinion that is in opposition to the rulers and leadership of the United States. And there is a real feeling that they need to somehow keep control, and they need to somehow keep things under control as discontent is rising all across the world. And the internet is a source not only of kind of providing accurate information that foments revolt and dissension, but in addition to that, the internet is a place that people can organize resistance. And there's a real feeling on the part of the powers that be, governments in the United States and Western Europe, that they need to control the internet and find a way that they can kind of keep their hegemony and keep the means of information and access to information under their control. And that's what's really underlying all of this. I don't think it has anything to do with stopping terrorism. I don't think that's what this is about. This is about controlling the message and controlling the public image of the United States and its allies and policing agencies and military around the world, which is rapidly deteriorating. So much new information is available, and people are really changing their minds all across the world. Well, it's most certainly an attack on privacy. In the United States, according to the Constitution, all search and seizure is only legal if done through a process of a court in which the reason of it is recorded. But this is just one example of the gradual erosion of civil liberties in the United States at this time. We know full well that the NSA is listening to our phone calls. We know full well that we can be subject here in the United States to indefinite detention at any point, held without charges. All kinds of civil liberties are gradually disappearing here in the United States, and there's nothing particularly surprising about that. And as Obama and Cameron discuss possibly forcing Facebook and Google to turn over material, that's just the latest development in the gradual erosion of our civil liberties and our civil rights. And the reality is that Facebook and Google are already turning over that information without being forced. They are cooperating with law enforcement institutions, and both Facebook and Google are private institutions, million and billion-dollar corporations that are cooperating with the government. And there's no question about that. But the ratcheting up of surveillance, the spying on citizens, you have to put it in the context of what's going on here in the United States at this time, which is the U.S. is gradually becoming a low-wage police state. The civil liberties we have are slipping away, and it's accompanying a rapid drop in the standard of living, as we no longer have manufacturing and industry, but a low-wage economy based on service sector jobs. And to accompany that, a heavy escalation of police presence, a rising prison population, a rise in government surveillance. This is all a pattern in the trend of how U.S. society is going. The U.S. is rapidly transitioning to a low-wage police state, and this is just one incarnation of that rapid transition. Well, we need to put what happened in France in the proper context, because not only were these police tracking them, but French military agencies were coordinating with the very terrorist group that carried this attack out in Syria. These Takfiri extremists, backed by the tax dollars and the funding of the United States, France, Britain, Western powers have been supporting Islamic extremism in Syria as it seeks to overthrow the government. The Syrian Arab Republic has been under attack by the very religious extremists that attacked the magazine in France. These same forces have been funded and supported by the West in an effort to bring down the Syrian government. That's the first thing. So we know that. And when these forces were killing Syrians, blowing up schools, kidnapping people, and doing the horrendous things they've been doing in Syria with the support of the West, the Western media didn't call them terrorists, it didn't call them murderers, it called them revolutionaries, and said that they were, fighting some romantic fight against the Assad government. Well, now that they're in France, and now that they killed white people in France, all of a sudden now they're calling the actions that they engage in terrorism. But what is happening is, the reality is that the rise of extremism, takfirism, this should have "Made in the USA" stamped all over it, because all over the world, the U.S. is really backing these forces and utilizing them. They used them to overthrow the Libyan government and to bring down the government of Gaddafi, and now they're using them in Syria to wage a relentless civil war against the Syrian Arab Republic and try to bring it down. So we're seeing a real cooperation between the West and its military and intelligence forces and these extremists. And then, is it a surprise then that these extremists get access to these Western countries? Is it a surprise that they then turn around and attack people in France? It shouldn't be a surprise at all. Right? That's the reality. And no expansion of the police state, no stripping away of our civil liberties is going to stop the rise of extremism, as long as our government and Western governments in general continue to align with extremism around the world. If they continue to fund and support religious extremists as they commit terrorism in Syria or elsewhere, if they continue to fund and support them, they are going to continue to rise. And that's the reality of the situation. It's not about restraints existing on the police. It's not about too much civil liberties. What's happening now is there is a deliberate policy by the U.S. government to support these forces, to bring down governments that get in their way. That took place in Libya. It took place in Syria. You can go back to Afghanistan, where the U.S. aligned with the Mujahideen and bin Laden to bring down the People's Democratic Party during the 1980s. The relationship between the West, the Pentagon, the CIA, Britain, France, and religious extremists goes back very far. These forces have been brought up and utilized by the West in order to carry out their goals internationally, and that needs to end. If we're going to continue to see this kind of terrorism take place, as long as these forces are funded and supported by our governments here in the West.